My parents laughed when they read Grandpa's will. Right there in front of the entire family, they called my inheritance a joke. I still remember my mother's smirk as she held up the envelope and said, "This is all he left her?" The room exploded with laughter. My older brother received luxury properties. My sister got investment accounts worth millions. Even distant relatives walked away with expensive gifts. And me? I inherited an old wooden box and a dusty pocket watch. Everyone thought Grandpa had finally forgotten me, but they were wrong. You see, while the family chased money, I was the only one who spent time with Grandpa during his final years. I listened to his stories. I helped him when he was sick. And every Sunday, we'd sit on his porch while he shared lessons nobody else cared to hear. At the funeral, my parents barely shed a tear. They were too busy discussing who would get what. Then came the reading of the will. When my father saw my tiny inheritance, he couldn't hide his satisfaction. "Looks like your favorite grandchild wasn't so favorite after all," he whispered. Everyone laughed again. Everyone except Grandpa's lawyer. Because while the family mocked me, he kept staring at that old wooden box. Almost as if he knew something nobody else did. And that night, when I finally opened it, my entire life changed forever. That night, I carried the wooden box back to my tiny apartment. The laughter from the will reading still echoed in my head. My parents were probably celebrating by now. My brother was already talking about selling one of his new properties. My sister had posted photos online bragging about her inheritance. And me? I was sitting alone at my kitchen table, staring at a box everyone believed was worthless. For a moment, I almost shoved it into a closet and forgot about it. But then I noticed something strange. The lock wasn't actually locked. It was designed to look sealed. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single folded letter. Nothing else. No money. No jewelry. No documents. Just a letter written in Grandpa's handwriting. I unfolded it carefully. The first line made my heart stop. If you're reading this, then the rest of the family reacted exactly as I expected. I blinked, then continued reading. They will believe I left you nothing. Let them. A chill ran down my spine. The letter explained that Grandpa had spent years building businesses before anyone in the family even knew he was wealthy. The fortune everyone fought over wasn't the real fortune. It was only a fraction of what he owned. As I read further, my pulse raced. Grandpa described a private company hidden behind layers of legal entities. A company that never carried his name. A company no relative knew existed. At the bottom of the page was a strange set of numbers and an address. The address belonged to an old office building downtown. I almost thought it was a prank, until I turned the letter over. Taped to the back was a small brass key, and beneath it were 7 words. "Trust no one until you know everything." The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I took a day off work and drove to the address. The building looked ordinary from the outside. Nothing about it suggested wealth. Nothing suggested power. I walked inside and found a receptionist sitting behind a polished marble desk. When I showed her the key, her expression changed instantly. She stood up. "One moment, miss." "Miss?" Nobody called me that. A minute later, 3 men in expensive suits appeared. The oldest one stared at the key. Then he asked a question that made my stomach drop. "Are you the granddaughter of Arthur Reynolds?" Grandpa's full name. I nodded slowly. The man smiled. For the first time all day. "Then we've been waiting for you." My heart pounded. Waiting for me? He led me through private elevators and secured hallways. Eventually, we entered a massive boardroom overlooking the city. Around the table sat executives, lawyers, and financial advisors. At least 20 people. Every single one of them stood when I entered. I froze. The man beside me pulled out a chair. Then he said something I will never forget. "Welcome back, ma'am." Back? I had never been there before. The lawyer placed a thick folder in front of me. Inside were company records, ownership documents, financial reports, and one unbelievable truth. According to those papers, I wasn't inheriting an old watch and a wooden box. I was inheriting controlling ownership of an empire worth billions. And at that exact moment, my phone started ringing. It was my father, then my mother, then my brother, one after another, because somehow they had just discovered something that was never supposed to be public. And suddenly, the family that laughed at me yesterday was desperate to talk. I stared at my phone as it vibrated nonstop across the boardroom table. Dad, Mom, my brother, my sister. Again and again. The same people who had laughed at me less than 24 hours earlier were suddenly desperate to hear my voice. I silenced every call. Then I turned my attention back to the documents in front of me. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Your grandfather instructed us to reveal everything only after you arrived here personally." My hands shook as I flipped through page after page. Shipping companies, technology firms, commercial real estate, private investments spread across multiple countries. The numbers were unbelievable. Billions, not millions. Billions. I kept expecting someone to tell me it was a mistake. But every signature, every document, every legal record carried Grandpa's approval. The lawyer slid another envelope toward me. This was his final instruction. I opened it immediately. Inside was a short handwritten message. "Money reveals character. Watch carefully." That was all it said. At first I didn't understand. Then my phone rang again, and suddenly, I did. The family had learned the truth, and now the test Grandpa warned me about was beginning. By the time I got home that evening, my parents were waiting outside my apartment. They had never visited before, not once, but now they stood there smiling like loving parents. Mom rushed forward and hugged me, a hug I hadn't received in years. "Oh, sweetheart, we're so proud of you." Proud? Yesterday she called my inheritance embarrassing. Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. "We always knew your grandfather trusted you." I almost laughed. No, they absolutely did not. But I stayed quiet. I wanted to see how far they would go. The next few days became a masterclass in greed. My brother suddenly wanted to spend time together. My sister called every morning. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't heard from in years somehow found my number. Everyone wanted lunch. Everyone wanted dinner. Everyone wanted a relationship. And every conversation eventually reached the same destination: money, investments, business opportunities, loans, gifts, favors. One evening, my parents invited me to a family gathering. When I arrived, the atmosphere felt completely different. People who once ignored me were rushing to pull out chairs, offering drinks, complimenting me, pretending we had always been close. Then Dad stood up and tapped his glass. The room fell silent. He smiled at me. "My daughter has been blessed with an incredible opportunity." Everyone applauded. I felt sick, not because of the applause, because I remembered how these same people had laughed during the will reading. Then Dad continued, "As family, we should all benefit from Grandpa's success." There it was. The real reason for the gathering. Not love, not support. A business proposal disguised as family unity. One by one, relatives began presenting ideas. A cousin wanted startup funding. An uncle wanted his debts paid. My sister wanted a luxury boutique. My brother wanted capital for a real estate project. Everyone had plans for my money. Nobody asked what I wanted. Nobody cared. Finally, Mom looked at me. "Well, what do you think?" I slowly stood. The room became silent. Every eye focused on me, waiting, expecting, calculating. I smiled. Then I pulled a folder from my bag, the same folder Grandpa's lawyers had prepared. I actually have something to share, too. The smiles around the room grew wider. They thought checks were coming. They thought their payday had arrived. Instead, I began reading. Every unpaid loan my father owed Grandpa. Every failed business Grandpa secretly rescued. Every debt my brother never repaid. Every financial favor the family had received for decades. The room turned pale. One by one, smiles disappeared. Then I revealed the final page. A document none of them expected. According to Grandpa's records, every major asset they inherited came with conditions. Conditions they had already violated. The lawyers had been monitoring everything. And because of those violations, much of their inheritance was about to be reclaimed. The silence was deafening. My father looked like he couldn't breathe. My brother's face turned white. My mother stared at me in shock. Then I delivered the words Grandpa would have loved. The joke inheritance wasn't mine. I looked around the room. It was yours. And for the first time in my life, nobody was laughing anymore. The room was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The confidence my family had walked in with was gone, replaced by pure panic. My father snatched the documents from the table and flipped through them frantically. "This can't be legal!" His voice cracked. The lawyers sitting behind me remained calm. One of them slid another file across the table. "It is entirely legal!" Dad's face turned pale. My brother stood up so quickly his chair nearly fell backward. "Grandpa would never do this to us." The lawyer looked him directly in the eye. Actually, he did. Then he opened a folder containing years of records, evidence, messages, signed agreements, everything. Grandpa had anticipated this moment. He knew exactly how the family would behave once money entered the picture. And he had prepared for it. For years. One by one, the truth came out. Properties my brother inherited were tied to performance requirements. He had already violated them. My sister's investment accounts contained restrictions she never bothered to read. She violated those too. Several relatives had attempted to sell assets they legally couldn't touch. Others had hidden debts and made false declarations. Every mistake triggered penalties, and those penalties all led to one destination. Me, the controlling owner of Grandpa's hidden empire. The family erupted. People shouted, blamed each other, made excuses, but the louder they became, the calmer I felt. Because for the first time, I wasn't the person being judged. They were. Finally, my mother began crying. Real tears. Or at least they looked real. She grabbed my hand. "Please. We're family." The same words she never used when I needed help. The same family who mocked me, ignored me, humiliated me. Suddenly, family mattered. I gently pulled my hand away. "You only remembered I was family after you learned I was rich." Her face collapsed. Dad lowered his head. For once, he had no response. A week later, the legal process was complete. Several assets returned to the company. Millions flowed back into the empire Grandpa had built. News of the family's financial disaster spread quickly among their social circles. The people who once bragged about their inheritances now avoided public attention. Meanwhile, I returned to Grandpa's office, the office that now belonged to me. On the desk sat his old pocket watch, the same watch everyone laughed at. I opened it. Inside was a hidden engraving I had never noticed before. A final message. Wealth is not a reward. It's a responsibility. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I understood. Grandpa never wanted revenge. Not really. He wanted the truth revealed. He wanted character exposed. and money was simply the tool he used to do it. Over the next year, I transformed the empire. Employees received better benefits. Scholarship programs were created. Charities Grandpa quietly supported received even more funding. The empire grew larger than ever before. Not because of greed, because of purpose. One afternoon, as I looked out from the top floor of headquarters, my assistant entered with a familiar envelope. "There was one final item in your grandfather's private vault." My heart skipped. I carefully opened it. Inside was a photograph of Grandpa and me from years ago. Tucked behind it was a note. The last note he would ever leave me. "I didn't leave you my empire because you were the smartest. I didn't leave it to you because you were the strongest. I left it to you because when everyone else saw my money, you still saw me." Tears filled my eyes. For the first time since he died, I smiled. Not because I had inherited billions, not because I had won, but because I finally understood. The greatest inheritance Grandpa left me was never the empire. It was the lesson, and that was something nobody could ever take away.